welcome to Idle Red Hands Weekly. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Chris.
And what is Idle Red Hands Weekly? It's the presumption that an individual is innocent until proven guilty and is entitled to their side of the story, and that human beings are basically good. So start from there until proven otherwise. Yes, and so this makes our 10th episode. So we've been doing this for 2 months now. So
it's not 2.5 months?
Yeah, depending on where those Fridays fell, we recorded. Yeah, so 10 episodes. So no more 00 episodes now. Now we're into double digits.
Are we going to triple? Because once we get to 99.
Right. Yeah. So I numbered them 3 digits. So I don't think we're going to break 1,000 in our lifetime. So
well, you never know.
I think it's safe. I'm glad we've been able to do this regularly because that was something that I've been wanting.
Especially since I don't have to edit.
Yes. Yeah, and a nice short size has made this much more manageable as far as production. So that's great. So what have you been up to this week?
As usual, Patreon. As it's Pride Month, because it's sort of a last-minute decision, I decided that all the money Fantastic Fate Resources collects for June pledges is going to be donated to the Equality Federation, and I'll match whatever we collect.
Oh, nice.
And I'm going to count, Patreon is still going to get its cut, but I'm going to count the pledges before Patreon gets its cut. So instead of whatever 97 cents off the dollar, it's going to be just the full dollar.
Great. Oh, that's great. Well, good. Well, that is definitely incentive to.
That's what I'm hoping.
Involved,
And no hard feelings if people then lower their pledge or cancel after the month.
Right. Well, you have to add a $100 point then. $100 a month.
Well,
point.
oof, yeah. Don't know what you would get for that. But, yeah.
Your undying affection.
Yeah. How about you?
Oh, so we finished last night was our second session of the Grimmerspace. So the Starfinder horror setting. It was a combat session. So I printed out maps and things, and I was wondering, we're going to go beyond this? But of course, it's combat. 3 hours of pew pew.
As soon as you hear roll for initiative, you're like, all right, that's the night.
Yes. But it was fun. The theme, the exploration, there was a lot of very dark and interesting things in the first session when we were exploring, but we were basically just trying to uncover the map and find out where things were and what was going on until 2 of our party got grabbed. And then this turned into the combat once we got to the security terminal and found out where they'd been taken. So then that turned into the combat. But the combat mechanics worked surprisingly well for horror because being level 1 characters, we were knocked down in stamina and HP very quickly and just had to start running and kind of figuring out a way. Are we going to try to blow them out into space? Are we going to set some sort of booby trap? And it was basically like popping out from behind doors and lobbing grenades and running away. And so it worked well because he, especially the way that the GM characterized him, he was this like unstoppable thing.
Michael Myers.
Yeah, right. So that worked well. And so I was surprised that the flavor and the setting worked well with the system. And I wasn't sure if that was going to be the case. Right. And but so that session felt really great. And it just worked out perfectly because we ended up, Chris's idea to use the security, there was like a security point with like a laser grid. Okay. And there was a misunderstanding that it's just laser lights.
It's just laser. So you didn't cube him.
Right.
All right.
They triggers it and the alarms go off and he goes, why are the alarms going off? And that was it. And so he was cornered in the room, but luckily he rolled well and was able to, and it was great because we didn't know the character was on his last few hit points. Okay. So it was perfect. So the one last attack, like the failed like coup de grace, and then the one last attack.
That's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, it worked well. So it had a funny cinematic, kind of horror movie thing.
It's actually really good.
Yeah.
I've been trying to frame my stuff more cinematic. Like, okay, if this was on the screen, what we would be seeing, or what kind of action would you take? Yeah. Like I didn't get a chance to play. I scanned through the adventure, Starfinder, Pathfinder, not really to my taste, but I had wondered if the amount of kind of checks and mechanics you had to make would enhance or detract from the horror nature, given that I think Starfinder and Pathfinder are kind of supposed to be the 0 to hero style games where your players are, or your characters, are pretty competent for the most part. Right. And that seems to kind of go against horror, where the protagonists are often depowered and the antagonist is so overpowered. Glad to hear it worked well. I'm kind of wondering if, as the characters go up in level, that flips, or if the game scenarios just make the antagonist exponentially more powerful to compensate for that.
I think so. And I think that the big bad in this setting are evil wizards. So I think magic can help kind of compensate for that. Even as you're getting more powerful, your attacks are more powerful. Maybe the things that you're facing are going to be harder to kind of suss and figure out, like, how do I even attack this, or what is this doing, or what's happening? And there was a lot of good disorienting sorts of things. Chris's character was an android, and he could see things like scrawled on the walls and things that we couldn't.
Right.
And he's just trying to explain things. So they were like, what are you talking about? What we don't. So that built some nice tension. And I think it's really up to the GM. They give you in the actual adventure itself a lot of things where they say, characters will be surprised by this if they haven't done a perception check, if they haven't done this, haven't done that. And he minimized that so that we weren't being tortured, and we weren't just constantly taking a step and rolling perception, taking a step and, touching everything in the room. He did a nice job of balancing that. And we sabotage some things, like some big heroic moves ended up, triggering gas vents or hydraulics that then created penalties for ranged attacks and things. So we kind of ended up screwing ourselves in kind of this wacky house of horrors and I think that that kept the tension nice and high, and also did make it challenging because it took all of we were all down to a single digit HP by the end of that encounter. So it worked out well, but it was very discouraging then. That was just the first part of it, and we were already almost party wiped, and then we're going to keep going.
Oh, okay. Well, good thing that, as you said, there's like pre-generated characters in that adventure thing, because I never really expected to have a funnel in Pathfinder, given how long it takes to make a Pathfinder character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was good. I think we really enjoyed it, and it was a new thing. I don't think, because I hadn't played horror before, so that was a new experience, and especially with a very kind of traditional, straightforward RPG system like Starfinder, I think that was a nice test of how that works, and I think they did a good job. I'd be really curious to see more of that and more of like how they're going to flavor the setting, because this had kind of it was a disgruntled employee kind of gone insane, and you're at a
meatpacking facility.
Yeah, right. So it was also the gore was kind of built into it. You're definitely going to, and they did talk about in the Kickstarter too, offering kind of different tastes and different levels. So session length and kind of intensity, they let you kind of dial in, so that if you really are uncomfortable just, having disemboweled and, corpses everywhere, that doesn't have to be a setting you can play in. You can play in a very tense, kind of more psychologically, intimidating.
Yeah, I Pathfinder and Starfinder are very much not to my taste as games mechanic wise, but you saying that, I am curious how they will do that, because they said the mechanics for this one really fit. Will the same thing happen when it's like psychological horror or different types of horror? That's a good point, yeah. And I also wonder if there is going to be any kind of mention of safety tools in the core book.
Yeah, you just mentioned that. And I guess that can bring us into the next topic. But you mentioned that at the UK Games Expo, that they were running demos of Grimmerspace.
Yes.
And someone wrote on Twitter that they really wanted to walk. They did, or
they did.
Yeah,
like
they did walk away.
I didn't realize what it was at first. The person just posed the question, when is it okay to kind of walk away from a con game? And my answer was, as long as you're being polite about it anytime, because you yourself know when you are being entertained and not, and why continue to spend time at something you're not enjoying? Just politely excuse yourself. It turns out they were talking about a Grimmerspace game, this exact scenario, where they didn't realize they were kind of signing up for a slasher type horror thing, which is very much not to their taste, and they didn't really care for the system either, so they just kind of excused themselves after about an hour and got up and left. That also kind of brings us to the big debacle that Things from the Flood gang rape event.
Right. Which was, so who, was it a UK paper or just a UK blog? Who reported that gang rape scene at UK Games Expo? There was a headline that
there was a headline. I think it was, I'm not sure. I think I saw it on like the BBC kind of. I first saw where the person actually at the game tweeted that they had the most horrible experience ever.
Right.
And it turned out to be this. And then I think the BBC didn't even quote or interview that person.
Oh, I see. And I heard that any attempts to kind of get that person's side of the story was just, I do not want to be re-traumatized. I'm not going to recount this. I'm not going to talk about it.
Fair enough.
As soon as I heard that, and as soon as I read that headline and people were reacting very strongly to it, and actually they went after the GM very, very hard, the first thing that I wanted is, I want everybody at that table's point of view. I mean, because I can understand one person being triggered, but and sitting and suffering through it is a little bit odd.
I don't know if they continue to sit there.
They did. The entire, So there was a YouTuber that actually did an interview with the GM and got his side of the story. And if this would have been somebody's salary, someone's professional job, this would have been something where you could actually measure the damage that was done to his reputation financially. This would be libelous, because what actually happened, and he recorded the session is actually recorded. What actually happened was completely misrepresented, but made such a juicy headline and it reminded me very much of the satanic scare of D&D. It's just like, what are these what are these players doing?
Oh yeah. I did read the BBC article where it was fairly short and it was kind of vague, and I came away from the article thinking the writer has never played an RPG,
right,
and is not really familiar with it.
Yeah, and that's that's what fueled a lot of that satanic panic kind of thing in the 80s, and I really think that's bad for the hobby. And so the GM's version of this is that I think he picked the wrong system, but he's a real kind of genre masher and likes to subvert things and make things very odd. So this is basically Trainspotting and Hostel set in the system of Things from the Flood, which is a little misleading because Things from the Flood is kind of a Stranger Things horror. It's not a hostile torture porn.
But it's also not as safe as Tales from the Loop.
Yes. But I don't know if people understand that. I don't think if this is Tales from the Loop, kids on bikes, how bad can this get? The original version of the system, your character doesn't even die. So how bad can this horror get? And him setting it in something. So basically the setting is, rich Brits are entertained by kidnapping and torturing young men that they find on the street. So they drop you right into the action of the setting where you're like zip tied, hands behind your back. Nice. Yeah. You've been given some drug, and the description of the drug, which he very screwed up, and the image that he put forward was you're naked and running, tied up, having escaped from something, covered in your own filth. So you shit yourself, basically.
Right.
I think he played 2 sessions of this. In the second session, that wasn't explained, that the drug, it's supposed to be funny that you're in such a weird situation. The drug itself gave you lower intestinal trouble, and that's why your ass is sore. But the interpretation is you're naked and running and your ass hurts. Okay. And people were like, oh, we've all been raped. Right. Yeah, and that's not even the definition of gang rape. It's a gang that was raped. So I think there's a player misinterpretation that we have been, anally penetrated because we have sore posteriors and we're running down the street. So I can't even believe that this happened. A total misinterpretation. The GM didn't correct it, allowed them to continue the session totally thinking that they had just been released from some sort of sexual assault.
I'm going to have to go look into this more. I guess the only thing I can say then right now is I wonder if safety tools were on the table. And I'm gonna guess not, because misunderstanding or not, this seems like something that could have been, if not fixed, at least addressed as it was happening with the use of something like the X card.
Yeah, right.
As soon as this happens, as soon as anyone is uncomfortable, ideally, and the flaws and limitations of the X card are you actually have to either tap it or hold it up, which in certain situations can be uncomfortable and people are reluctant to do. Right. There's a big discussion, at least in the kind of circles I'm in, of are there better tools to use that kind of don't do that, because you still do have to signal you are uncomfortable, which in certain situations can be uncomfortable, or you are too uncomfortable to actually signal you are uncomfortable and no one else picks up on it.
Yeah.
But this seems like something that could have been avoided with safety tools at the table.
Yeah, and I think it seems like a GM that was just very excited about his clever idea and not paying attention to how the table was kind of reacting to it. Right. And maybe also enjoying the fact, wanting to make people squirm or wanting to make people a little bit uncomfortable. And it was advertised 18 plus and graphic content, but that's not going to be enough. It should just say, this is going to be disturbing. And the thing that he reinforced too is they were all playing 18 plus characters. Everybody at the table was 18 plus.
Right.
So there wasn't, but they keep, Twitter and the media keep hammering minors, child rape.
Oh, really?
Rape. Yeah. So because of Tales from the Loop, because of Stranger Things, because of our image of the kids from Goonies got tied up and assaulted. Right. And that's a great, shocking headline, but I don't know. I really think it's dangerous for the hobby to be mixing genres and players that are not going to, they're coming in with an understanding of Dungeons and Dragons or the few limited things that they've experienced, and they run up against a GM that wants to blow their minds or wants to put them in an uncomfortable situation. And I think role-playing allows, it's built to do that, to be creative and to give you expression, and that simulation at the table of this is what it's like to be this kind of person, or that's what it's like to be in this situation, is the beautiful thing about role playing, where the creativity comes in. But at the same time, I think a lot of people aren't going to be prepared for that. And you, like you said, there has to be something there where people can just, I'm tapping out. You know, that's,
right. Or you just kind of stand up and leave, which is the extreme version. But I absolutely agree that role-playing games can be, drawing a blank on what word I should use, but I was just kind of having a conversation where someone asked, okay, how do you come up with the personality for your RPG characters? And I thought about it and I said, my RPG character is basically me without the restraint of reality. Right? Where it's kind of like, yes, RPGs are a great safety net tool to explore a whole bunch of different things about yourself or the situation or being another person. And that's great. And that's kind of what they're there for. But there's not really a connection there. For con games, like I've run a couple sessions at Strategicon a couple years ago, which I'm not a representative of anyone. And I don't think a lot of people running games there were representatives of any company. But I really don't think you can go into a public game like that with the intent to shock your players and intentionally make them uncomfortable unless you have expressly said as much in the write-up for the game.
Yeah.
And labeling it 18 plus and making the characters 18 plus and making sure everyone at the table is 18 plus does not excuse that kind of behavior and also kind of doesn't mean everyone sitting down at the table is going to enjoy that type of game.
Right.
I mean, you got to put some kind of disclaimer where it's like, the intent of this game is to make you uncomfortable. And like, as a GM, I'm going to do my damnedest to do that. And unless you put that there, then you really don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. It sounds like this GM has been doing this for several years and doesn't really understand that there's kind of a shift in people's tolerances and people's sensitivities to things, and especially younger, and so it's a very dangerous thing to be playing with. That people aren't going to laugh off kind of shocking or upsetting content the same way that they may have in like his when he was young.
And was it laughing off back then, or was it just kind of like, well, we can't really do anything?
Yeah, right. Well, no, that's true. And so the thing this whole situation does make me worry about is you don't want to endanger all of the wonderful creative kind of indie development that's going into RPGs, because people are experimenting with how far you can push different genres and different types of experiences. You don't want to give the power to Wizards of the Coast to just step in and say, yeah, none of this is legitimate. This is not family friendly. This is dangerous.
I didn't think about that.
And we have the money to shut this down, to run a PR campaign or get politicians involved in saying, none of this subversive wholesome, if these corporations are interested in making money and they actually do feel, well, this independent games publishing is if it's taking a sizable percentage out of our business, we can go after them and use these sorts of things as examples.
Didn't think about that. And I mean, I guess the counterpoint to that is a rising tide floats all boats, right? Where everyone's kind of said, okay, well, the rise of 5e has kind of buoyed everybody else up as well. But I guess then the flip side, I thought about it, if WotC wanted, or Hasbro, more importantly, said, okay, you got to do something about that because it's affecting our sales negatively, being associated with this. They have the money to actually kind of do stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Like, I don't know what they would do, especially with like decentralized networks of like itch.io and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I guess it's kind of a real...
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see that happening. And I also don't want to see shows like the UK Game Expo start to censor. I mean, they can just say, okay, we've got guidelines, but they're not going to be able to review. I mean, these people are volunteering basically their time and enjoyment of the hobby. And it is a hobby. And these people that are involved are just trying to do something fun and creative. There's not money involved, but I really think that they need to be careful about the atmosphere. Like if they're going to just, really take all the creativity and like basically make all the independent RPG writers and companies just flee because they're afraid to be criticized. And also that being then bad publicity, for their small companies or their work.
I forget how it's phrased, but it's the intolerance paradox, where like a tolerant society cannot tolerate those who are intolerant. So I was kind of using that as, I guess, a counterpoint to your free speech thing, where it's like, okay, volunteer runner, no, we still have guidelines, and we kind of like stick to these guidelines, and anyone who breaks them, you got to be kicked out.
Yeah.
I mean, because everyone who goes to a convention has to feel safe. So, I mean, it's one thing to not stifle creativity, but you also got to be like, look, okay, I guess similar to that WotC discussion we just had, like you are detracting from the experience of everyone else at the convention.
Right.
Tolerate that, so you're out.
And what a lot of conventions do in other industries is just like they put up curtains and they say, this is the adult area. This is, if you want this kind of experience, we're not going to make this open to the public. We're not going to have materials out on the tables, for the kids to come across. And we're not going to let you listen to a session of something that might be upsetting. So we're going to put it in this area. And I think that's completely fine, based on sensitivity, but I don't think they should shut that down. I don't think they should, start to censor, start to change what people are bringing to conventions, or it's just going to change the whole tone of things. And then, give the big companies more
ammunition,
more ammunition and more ability to kind of take over the whole.
No, it's fair.
Show. Yeah, it's a difficult question, and I think this was upsetting, and I think the news of it was handled very poorly, and of course people's reactions were very strong immediately, and it's just brought a lot of negative attention that I don't think the hobby needs.
Yeah. Hopefully it kind of gets resolved.
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like the GM involved was super banned, and then people just like went after him personally. And so now we know all about his favorite online pornography and everything. I mean, just like, and he was doxxed. So
I really don't agree with that.
Kind of
that's going too far.
Pitchfork and torches kind of stuff is, I think that's a bad example. And that's the kind of stuff that like the Christian right used to do in the 80s. And now that's the option. That's what people turn to for like political activism online, is those same kind of rough tactics that, I don't know. It's a difficult question. So onto brighter, happier things.
Well, Kickstarter news. Something I was going to think about backing was Rocket Age 5e.
Oh.
Rocket Age used to be the Vortex system and is now gone back to Why Not Games, where the author that's their own company. And I was kind of reluctant. I'm like, oh, okay, another game that's going to go over to 5e. But they're actually this is a Kickstarter for a 5e compatible version, but Rocket Age Classic is still going to be around. And from this point on, they're going to produce 2 separate lines of books for all their books, essentially. So I understand why they're doing it. 5e is real big. It's going to bring more people to the Rocket Age setting, which is kind of like 1930s Sword and Planet pulp, kind of like the future that never was, right? And I'm not sure if I'm going to back it, but I probably will, because as often as I say I tend to back things because I like what they're doing and want them to be successful, I think having 2 rules for the same game is a pretty decent idea, and I'm happy that they didn't just abandon the Vortex system in favor of 5e.
That's great. Very good. All right, well, check that out. We'll put a link in the description. Also on Kickstarter, The Few and the Cursed board game. So that's based on the comic of the same name, The Few and Cursed. And that comic is by Felipe Cagno and Fabian Nieves. I hope I got that okay. So the board game expands on the lore of the comics and brings the characters and creatures to a deck building miniatures board game for 1 to 4 people. So it looks very interesting because it seems to be post-apocalyptic Old West. And so there's magic and monsters and kind of a very survival setting. So the game itself is based in the desert of the Pacific Ocean. So the end of water on the planet. And so you're exploring the kind of the desert and ruins of... So that looked interesting. And they're also doing a Kickstarter for the final issue of the comic. So the 6th issue, which is the finale of this story arc for The Few and Cursed. So both of those are running simultaneously. And the artwork is beautiful. The story looks really interesting. And the mechanics of the game itself look great. The game itself is designed by Mike Gnade, and it looks great. The characters themselves are curse chasers that you're playing, and then there's monsters and baddies to fight, and nice looking miniatures and good art on that game. So if people want to find you, where is the best place?
Twitter, as always.
Yes.
I'm Hivemind, HYVEMYND. You can also find me on Fantastic Fate Resources. That's my Patreon. And fantasticfateresources.com.
And as always, if you want to take a look at the podcast and also our videos that we're producing for YouTube, that would be idleredhands.com. Follow us at idleredhands on Twitter. And if you want to get involved, support the podcast, and actually have some influence on the direction of things, what we take a look at, what games we play, patreon.com/idleredhands. Thank you for joining us for our 10th episode.
Yeah.
And here's to another 10 more.
Yeah, hopefully more than that.
Yeah. Another 10,000 more. And so we will be back next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
and on some Sunday